Hey there, come closer to the fire for a moment. There is a clay tablet in the dark, burned hard by the same flames that destroyed a royal library. And across its surface, someone has scratched away the very words we most want to read. That is where tonight begins. Not with a clean answer, not with a shining God beyond all harm, but with broken clay, divine blood, erased names, and a warning that seems to whisper from the oldest dust. The beings called the Anunnaki were powerful. Yes, they shaped fate, ruled cities, received offerings, and stood above human life like storms above a plain. But in the old stories, they also feared, labored, argued, rested, bled, and sometimes died. If this quiet journey gives your thoughts a place to settle, please like the video and subscribe. It helps these old mysteries find other tired minds in the night. Now let the room soften around you. The fire is low. The candle is steady. No need to force calm. Just listen, and let the ancient clay speak slowly. Imagine Nineveh after the burning. Not the city in its pride. Not the great library when scribes still moved through its rooms with baskets of tablets and ink-darkened hands. But Nineveh after flame. The walls are broken. The floors are covered in ash. Shelves have collapsed. The air holds that bitter smell that comes when wood, rate, oil, and human intention have all burned together. In the wreckage, the clay tablets remain. Not because fire spared them gently, but because fire hardened them. That is one of history's quiet ironies. Destruction preserved what peace might have lost. A tablet that might have crumbled in damp air became stronger inside catastrophe. A line written for a king became a message for people who would not be born for thousands of years. A scribe pressed words into wet mud, perhaps thinking of a temple account, a myth, a ritual, a name too dangerous to say aloud. Then time passed. Empires rose and fell. Languages died. The city turned to ruin. And still the clay waited. If you lean closer to that imagined tablet, you can almost feel how small the marks are. They are not grand carvings on a palace wall. They are little wedges, pressed one by one into clay that was once soft enough to receive a fingertip. Some signs are clear. Some are cracked. Some vanish at the edge where the tablet broke. And some, in the source telling, are not lost by accident at all. They are scraped away as if someone looked at the word and decided that even dead clay should not be trusted with it. That is the feeling that gives this story its shadow. Not ignorance, but concealment. Not a lost page, but a covered mouth. In the source story we are following, some of those tablets are described as holding a forbidden knowledge. Not a simple weapon. Not merely a poison. Not a single secret blade hidden in a temple wall. Something more dangerous because it touches the nature of divinity itself. The question is soft, but it has teeth. What if the creators were not immortal? What if the gods could be harmed? What if the oldest texts remembered not only how humanity was made, but why humanity made the gods uneasy? We should be careful here. Much of this is speculative. Scholars read these texts through many lenses, theology, royal ideology, myth, ritual, social memory, and ancient imagination. The source leans into a darker possibility, that the gaps and scratches in the record may conceal something deliberate. We cannot prove every claim. We can only walk slowly through the evidence and the myth, and notice where the old stories begin to tremble. The first trembling begins in the Atrahasis epic. The name Atrahasis means exceedingly wise one, and the text belongs to the deep Mesopotamian tradition of creation, lavur, flood, and human destiny, preserved in Akkadian tablets. Copied and recopied across centuries, the story describes a time when the gods themselves worked. They dug canals. They bore burdens. They carried the heavy maintenance of the world. The divine workers grew tired, and their weariness became rebellion. That detail already changes the feeling of the gods. These are not serene beings floating above all need. They grow exhausted. They complain. They quarrel. They demand relief. Honestly, there is something almost familiar in that. Even heaven, it seems, had labor disputes. A cosmos full of thunder and sacred decrees, and still someone was unhappy with the workload. The crisis begins with labor, which is a very earthy beginning for a divine mystery. There is no distant puzzle at first. There is work, wet soil, channels that must be opened, water that must be guided, baskets that must be carried. The gods in the tale are pressed into the same truth the river people knew every season. That order is not a statue. Order is maintenance. That is why the rebellion matters. It is the pressure of a system that has demanded too much of those beneath it. The great gods gathered to solve the crisis. Picture the assembly quietly. No loud spectacle is needed. A hall of shadow and height. Air thick with authority. The gods seated according to rank. Enlil with command in his breath. Enki with wisdom moving under his silence like fresh water beneath soil. The birth goddess present, the one who will shape life from what is given. Around them, divine beings wait for a solution that will preserve order without requiring the gods to keep digging forever. The solution is terrible. One god must die. The text names him differently in different translations. Wilu in some, Geshtu in others. Sometimes the name appears in damaged or debated form, as if even his identity has had to travel through broken clay. But the important point is not only his name. It is why he is chosen. He possesses intelligence. The source calls attention to the word connected with understanding, reason, conscious thought. He is not chosen because he is the strongest, not because he is the most beautiful, not because he has the loudest thunder or the sharpest weapon. He is chosen because of mind, awareness, the capacity to think, understand, and perhaps one day question. That makes the sacrifice colder. The gods do not simply need life force. They need a kind of divine consciousness that can pass into clay and make the new beings useful. Humanity is not made as a herd of breathing bodies. Humanity is made as a thinking instrument, a worker that can hear orders, remember skills, learn tasks, build canals, serve temples, and keep the machinery of sacred life moving. The text says that the flesh and blood of the sacrificed God are mixed with clay. Let that image remain soft, but do not look away from it entirely. Wet clay in a vessel, earth darkened by water from the deep, divine blood entering it. The birth goddess working the mixture with hands that belong to creation and necessity. Not a battlefield. Not a murder done in chaos. A ritual procedure. A solemn making. A recipe at the edge of horror. This is why the source calls it so unsettling. In the narrative logic of the myth, a god dies so that humans can exist. Not a distant god who fades politely into symbolism. A thinking god. A god with awareness. A god whose essence is taken and mixed into earth so that clay can become a creature that speaks, remembers, works, and wanders. If you were standing in that mythic chamber, you might hear almost nothing. Maybe the scrape of a bowl. Maybe water poured slowly. Maybe the breath of the assembled gods. No one jokes. No one moves quickly. Even the ones who demanded relief may feel, for one moment, what has been done. Because once divine blood enters clay, the result cannot be only clay again. This is the first key in the forbidden question. If a god can be slaughtered for creation, then a god can be killed. If divine consciousness can be extracted, then divine nature is not untouchable. If what makes a god powerful can be transferred into another vessel, then divinity is not sealed forever inside one body. That is the thought the source wants us to feel. It is not claiming that every line should be read as literal history. It is asking us to sit with the mythic logic. In that logic, the gods are not invulnerable. Their blood has use. Their minds can be taken. Their essence can be moved. And humanity is born from this. A clay being with divine residue inside it. A worker created for service. Yes, but also a thinker descended from a thinking God. A mortal creature that carries, however faintly, the memory of an immortal wound. There is a strange intimacy in that. The story says that what allows you to wonder tonight, what allows a mind to lean toward the old tablets and ask what they mean, comes from the same dangerous gift the gods needed and feared. Awareness. The spark that obeys, then learns, then questions. At first, the gods may have seen only usefulness. Hands to dig canals. Backs to carry baskets. Voices to offer praise. Bodies to feed the temples. But intelligence is never merely useful. It spreads. It compares. It notices patterns. It asks why the master rests while the servant works. It asks why the creators can command death but also fear death. It asks what blood means if the blood of a god lives in human clay. Those are not safe questions. Maybe that is why the source imagines trembling scribes. Not because every scribe literally shook at every line, but because the idea itself trembles. A tradition that says humans were made from divine blood also plants a seed of danger. The servant is not wholly separate from the master. The creation is not empty. Something of the Creator has been placed inside it. Outside our firelit room, the modern world continues. But in the story, we remain near the first clay. The birth goddess shapes 14 first humans, 7 male and 7 female in the Atrahasis tradition. They will grow. They will multiply. They will work. They will become the answer to divine exhaustion. But they will also carry the problem that the gods did not fully understand. A mind taken from a god does not stop being dangerous simply because it has been placed into a mortal body. The fire lowers a little. The candle leans in its own small wind. In the ruins of Nineveh, a tablet rests under ash, hardened into memory. In the mythic assembly, the gods watch clay begin to breathe. The first human eyes open, and behind them is not emptiness. Behind them is a borrowed spark. Behind them is the death of a god. And from that moment onward, the creators have given their creation the one thing that may one day make it able to understand them. The first clay has opened its eyes, and now the question becomes more intimate. What exactly passed into it? The old text says flesh and blood. It says the divine substance of a slain god was mixed with earthly clay, and from that mixture humanity was made. But in Mesopotamian thought, blood was never only a red fluid inside the body. It was life. It was force. It was the sign that something was not yet a corpse. It belonged to warmth, movement, breath, memory, and the strange hidden power that makes a being aware of itself. The Akkadian word damu can mean blood, but the idea surrounding blood reaches deeper than the physical. Blood carries essence. Blood carries identity. Blood marks kinship, sacrifice, debt, and transformation. When divine blood enters clay, the clay does not simply become moist earth with a dramatic backstory. It receives something living, something thinking, something that once belonged among the gods. This is why the choice of Wilu, or Gestu, matters so much in the source story. He was not random material. He was the god associated with intelligence, understanding, conscious thought. The gods did not take any convenient divine body and mix it into the mud like a careless cook with poor respect for ingredients. They selected a mind. That makes the creation of humanity feel less like animation and more like transfer. A thought becomes inheritance. A god is ended, and awareness changes vessels. Imagine the clay again. Now, not as a lump on a table, but as a threshold. One side is earth, cool, dark, ordinary, full of dust and river water. The other side is divinity, bright or terrible, not in the harmless way of a temple painting, but as a force with memory and will. The birth goddess stands between them. Her hands fold the two together. Clay accepts blood. Blood disappears into clay. Something new begins to form, and no one in the divine assembly can fully predict what it will someday ask. At first, the purpose seems simple. The new beings will work. They will dig canals. They will maintain fields. They will bring offerings. They will feed the temples, serve the gods, keep the sacred order supplied with bread, beer, encens, laver, and praise. They will be useful. and usefulness is what the tired gods wanted. But the gods chose intelligence. That is the problem. A being that can understand orders can also understand injustice. A being that can learn skills can also learn secrets. A being that can remember procedures can remember contradictions. A being that can build a temple can eventually ask why a god needs a temple at all. This is the dangerous gift inside humanity. The source leans heavily on this idea, and as a mythic reading, it is powerful. Human consciousness is not a harmless lamp. It illuminates. It compares. It makes patterns. It takes the scattered fragments of the world and tries to join them into meaning. It is useful to rulers until it begins to notice the ruler. There is a dark humor in that, very quiet but real. The gods needed intelligent servants, then became uneasy when the servants started behaving intelligently. That is a problem many employers have created for themselves, though usually with fewer cosmic consequences. The first humans carry the divine spark, but not the whole flame. They are mortal. They are clay. They hunger, sleep, tear, bleed, and return to earth. Yet the thought inside them has a different ancestry. It comes from the sacrificed God. It has tasted, in the source imagination, a higher place, before being lowered into flesh. That is why human beings in these stories are so strange. Not animals only. Not gods. Something mixed. Dust with questions. Clay with memory. A worker who can wonder. The story then moves from divine blood to another kind of transferable divinity. The me. For clean hearing, let us call them the May powers. The May powers are among the most fascinating ideas in Sumerian religion. Scholars often translate them as divine decrees, powers, offices, ordinances, or the sacred structures that make civilization and cosmos function. None of those words is perfect. The May powers are not simple rules written on a divine notice board. In the myths, they can be held. They can be guarded. They can be transferred. They can be taken away. That is why they matter here. If a god can possess a May power and lose it, then divine power is not entirely fixed inside the god. It is something held, managed, carried, perhaps even stolen. The source compares the May powers almost to divine technologies, cosmic functions, the operating rights of civilization itself. Kingship is a May power. Priesthood is a May power. The throne, the scepter, the measuring rod, shepherdship, heroism, wisdom, music, lamentation, rejoicing, law, craft, judgment, the art of song, even the destruction of cities. All can appear in the wide, strange lists of these sacred powers. The most famous myth of transfer is the story of Inanna and Enki. Enki lives in Eridu, near the Apsu, the deep fresh water beneath the earth. His world is water, wisdom, cleverness, secrets, and old knowledge. Inanna comes to visit him. She is the goddess of love, war, desire, ambition, brilliance, and all the difficult weather of the heart. When she enters a story, one should pay attention, preferably with both eyes open. Enki welcomes her with a feast. There is beer. There is always danger when divine wisdom and too much beer sit at the same table. The lamps are low. The water of the Abzu murmurs somewhere beneath the holy place. The bowls are filled. Words become warmer. Enki, generous or intoxicated or charmed beyond caution, begins giving Inanna the May powers one by one. Kingship, priesthood, truth, descent into the underworld, ascent from it, craft, music, judgment, power, the arts and offices that make a city great. Inanna receives them. She does not receive them as a compliment only. She loads them onto the boat of heaven and carries them away to Uruk. The image is beautiful and almost funny if you let it be. A goddess leaving a divine banquet with the fundamental powers of civilization packed like cargo, while the god of wisdom eventually wakes into regret. When Enki sobers and understands what he has done, he sends servants to recover the May powers. But Inanna continues. The boat moves. The powers reach her city. Uruk becomes great. The implication is unsettling. If Enki can lose powers through intoxication and persuasion, then what might happen through war, theft, ritual, bending, or betrayal? If divine powers can be carried, then the border around a god is not sealed. A god is not only what he is. A god is also what he holds. This changes the meaning of divine mortality. To kill a god may not always mean ending a body. Sometimes it might mean stripping away the powers that make the being divine. Remove kingship. Remove wisdom. Remove the measuring rod. Remove the sacred office. Remove the name. Remove the authority. What remains may still exist, but perhaps it no longer rules. Perhaps it becomes a shadow of itself, long-lived but emptied, alive but diminished. That is a quieter death. Maybe worse. The Source wants us to see this pattern. Blood can be transferred. Intelligence can be harvested. May powers can be stolen. Names can be hidden. Substances can be guarded. Immortality can be maintained or lost. The gods are not marble absolutes beyond all change. They are beings within systems of power, and systems can be disrupted. Think of Enki after Inanna leaves. The feast room is quieter now. The bowls are empty. The water below still murmurs, not judging, because water is polite in that way. The god of wisdom discovers that wisdom has been made lighter. Something has gone. His messengers rush after the boat, but the river of story already moves toward Uruk. The loss is not symbolic only inside the tale. It has consequence. A city changes. A goddess rises. A god is diminished. That is the kind of danger hidden in transfer. What can be given can be taken. What can be taken can be weaponized. What can be weaponized may one day return against those who first held it. Now, place this beside the creation of humanity. The gods created servants from the blood of a thinking god. They transferred consciousness into clay. They made a species capable of memory, labor, ritual, shil, and question. Then they lived among the consequences. What if the May powers could be understood? What if divine names could be learned? What if the substances of life and death could be found? What if humans, made from divine intelligence, were never merely tools, but eventual readers of the tools used to make them? That is the forbidden possibility. A human worker bends over a canal. He is tired. Mud covers his legs. The sun presses on his neck. Above him, the temple rises, and within it the gods receive bread and smoke. He may not know the secret of his own origin. He may not know Wilu, or Gestu, or the name of the god whose mind became part of him. But he watches. Humans always watch. Servants watch masters with a precision masters often underestimate. He learns who rests, who hungers, who fears noise, who needs offerings, who keeps power hidden, who loses power after too much beer. The gods may have wished to create obedient life. They created remembering life. The clay remembers through tablets. The blood remembers through bodies. The mind remembers through questions. And question, once born, do not always remain in their assigned place. That is why the source returns again and again to fear. The Anunnaki fear humanity not because humans are stronger. They are not. Not because humans are longer lived. They are not. Not because humans possess the May powers openly. They do not. They fear the possibility that intelligence, multiplied across generations, might gather what one short life cannot hold. A single person dies. A species remembers. A tablet breaks. Another tablet repeats the line. A name is scratched away. The gap itself tells later minds that something stood there. Forbidden knowledge survives not only in words, but in the shape of its absence. The fire beside us settles. The candle makes a small pool of gold on the table. Imagine the boat of Inanna slipping away through the dark water, loaded with invisible powers. Imagine Enki realizing that what he held has moved beyond him. Imagine the first humans standing in the wet clay light of morning, not yet aware that inside their fragile bodies lives a transferred spark. The question now becomes sharper. If divine blood can become human consciousness, and divine powers can leave one god for another, then what could truly kill an Anunnaki? A weapon, perhaps. A name, perhaps. A substance, perhaps. But beneath all of those lies the most dangerous thing. The knowledge that divinity can be separated, moved, weakened, and understood. The first humans were made to work. That is the plain beginning, and perhaps the saddest one. They were not shaped first for poetry, or starlight, or the soft pleasure of sitting beside a river after the heat has gone from the day. In the old account, they were made because the gods were tired. Canals had to be opened. Fields had to be kept alive. Temples had to be supplied. Bread, beer, incense, water, clay, reed, and animal offerings had to move through the sacred economy like blood through a body. The new creatures rose from clay with a spark of divine intelligence inside them. And at first, the plan worked beautifully. Too beautifully. They learned the mud. They learned the water. They learned how to cut channels into the plain and persuade the rivers to become less wild for a season. They carried baskets. They pressed bricks. They planted grain. They ground flour. They built homes, shrines, storage rooms, walls, streets, and eventually the great houses of the gods. They looked small under the temple platforms, but there were many of them, and many small hands can change a landscape. Imagine them at dawn. The first light lies low across the fields. The air smells of wet clay, barley, smoke, and river reeds. A worker lifts a basket from the ground, and the woven edge bites softly into his fingers. Another scrapes silt from a canal. Another presses bare feet into mud that will become brick. Somewhere, a child watches adults move with the serious rhythm of survival. The world is not easy, but it is becoming arranged. That was what the gods wanted. Human hands turned divine command into daily order. Yet the same hands learned more each season. This is where the source begins to darken. The humans were created to serve, but they had not been made from empty material. They carried the mind of a sacrificed god, diluted perhaps, limited certainly, wrapped in hunger and sleep and pain, but present all the same. The clay body made them mortal. The divine blood made them aware. Awareness grows. It watches. It repeats. It improves. It remembers where the canal broke last year. It remembers which prayer was spoken when the child recovered. It remembers that the temple needs offerings, but also that the god needs the temple. It remembers which official lied about the grain. It remembers the sound of priests speaking behind a curtain. It remembers because memory is the quiet rebellion of mortal beings. In the Atrahasis tradition, humanity multiplies. The old text speaks of their noise. That word can sound almost harmless if we hear it too quickly. Noise, like too many neighbors, too many footsteps, too much evening chatter. But in the myth, noise is deeper. It is human increase, human restlessness, human complaint, human life pressing upward until the heavens cannot ignore it. Enlil hears them. The sound rises from the plain like insects after rain, like markets at dawn, like hammers, crying children, arguments over water, songs at grinding stones, prayers repeated too often, laughter too near the temples, grief too loud to be orderly. Humanity has become a living weather beneath heaven. To Enlil, this noise is disorder. He is the Lord of air, command, and authority. He values order the way a wall values straightness. The source presents his fear not merely as irritation, but as something more political and divine. The servants have multiplied. The clay bodies with divine intelligence have become too numerous, too active, too difficult to contain. The very experiment that solved divine labor now creates another crisis. So the gods begin to limit humanity. First comes sickness. Enki intervenus. He is the god of wisdom, hidden waters, craft, and clever survival. He does not always confront authority directly. He works around it. He whispers. He advises. He teaches the human wise one how to pray, how to redirect offerings, how to seek help from the right divine power. In the old story, the plague is lifted because knowledge slips through the cracks of command. That pattern matters. Enlil sends reduction. Enki sends instruction. Humanity survives because someone teaches it what heaven would prefer it not know. Then come drought and famine. The rivers shrink. The fields crack. The air becomes bright and pitiless. Dust gathers in the mouth. Grain heads fail to fill. Cattle ribs show beneath hide. The sound of grinding stones fades because there is less grain to grind. Hunger makes people speak more softly, not because they are peaceful, but because the body has begun to save even words. Again, Enki helps. He teaches through secret counsel, through ritual knowledge, through the wisdom of water. Perhaps he shows how to preserve food. Perhaps he teaches where to dig, how to pray, how to alter the sacred order so the disaster loosens its grip. The exact details shift through versions and fragments, but the pattern remains. Humanity receives hidden aid from the god of wisdom. Enlil grows more severe. The final answer is water. Not gentle water. Not the canal water that feeds barley. Not the river at dawn with reeds whispering along its edge. The flood is water without boundary. Water that removes roads, walls, fields, names, and the simple confidence that tomorrow will have the same ground as today. Enki warns Atrahasis, the exceedingly wise one. He does it indirectly, because divine councils have rules, and wise gods often know that rules can be walked around if one walks softly enough. He speaks to a wall, or through a dream, or through a boundary between command and mercy. Build a boat. Preserve life. Carry seed. Carry what can continue. The flood comes. The gods themselves grow afraid of what has been unleashed. That is another sign of their limitation. They are powerful enough to authorize catastrophe, but not serene enough to watch it without trembling. The old stories sometimes show them gathering like frightened birds, hungry later for the offerings that only humans can give. Their dependence returns to them in the silence after destruction. When the flood recedes, humanity remains. Not untouched, not unbroken, but present, and the gods must face the truth that they still need the beings they feared. Without humans, who will bring offerings? Who will keep temples supplied? Who will speak the names? Who will maintain the sacred houses? Who will feed the divine order from below? This is one of the darkest little reversals in the myth. Humanity is made because gods need workers. Humanity becomes too much, so gods try to reduce it. But if humanity is erased, the gods themselves suffer loss. The servant is dangerous because the master depends on him. After the flood, a new compromise appears. Humans are allowed to continue, but with limits. Infant mortality enters the world. Some children will not remain. Infertility enters the world. Some wombs will not open. Lifespans are shortened. Human years shrink until no single person can gather too much knowledge in one body. These elements appear in the Atrahasis tradition as ways of controlling population. That is the mainstream frame, and it makes sense within the story. But the source adds a darker reading. Perhaps the limits control more than numbers. Perhaps mortality is also a lock placed on memory. Think of it gently, but clearly. A being that lives long enough learns too much. It sees patterns across generations. It remembers what rulers deny. It watches temples rise and fail. It gathers secrets from fathers, mothers, priests, workers, scribes, and ruins. A short life must pass its knowledge forward through fragile channels. A song, a tablet, a warning, a craft, a story whispered near fire. Short lives scatter memory. Long lives concentrate it. If the gods feared human knowledge, then shortened lifespans become more than population control. They become a way of keeping the divine spark from burning too steadily in any single person. Of course, this is speculative. The ancient text itself can be read as a myth explaining why life is hard, why death comes early, why birth is uncertain, why suffering exists in a world made by gods. But the speculative reading gives the story a colder edge. It asks whether human mortality was not only a condition, but a containment system. The human body becomes both prison and key. The prison is obvious. Hunger, sleep, illness, age, loss, breath that stops, clay that returns to clay. The key is quieter. Thought, memory, curiosity. The divine spark passed from Wilu, Orgestu, into the first wet human form. The mind that observes, records, compares, and asks why. The gods may shorten a life. They cannot easily stop one life from teaching another. This is where clay returns to the story. The same mud that made the human body also made the tablet. A person dies, but the tablet waits. A scribe ages, but the wedge mark remains. A name is erased, but the erasure itself remains like a dark doorway. The gods may scatter human memory across generations, yet humans answer by inventing storage for thought. Writing becomes the mortal answer to shortened years. A human body forgets when it dies. A tablet forgets more slowly. Imagine a scribe after the flood age, or long after, sitting in a room that smells of reed, clay, lamp smoke, and dust. He copies an older line about the gods limiting human life. He may think he is preserving piety. He may think he is doing a school exercise. He may not know that the act itself is rebellion against forgetting. The source wants us to see that human danger is not strength. It is accumulation. One generation learns the canal. Another learns the star. Another learns the name. Another learns the ritual. Another notices a gap in an older tablet and wonders what was removed. The divine spark is divided among mortal bodies, but memory slowly gathers it again. That is why the gods in these stories seem uneasy. They are not afraid of one farmer with a hoe. They are afraid of humanity as a remembering species, a species made to serve, but able to record, a species weakened by death, but strengthened by transmission, a species born from divine blood, yet trapped in clay long enough to become patient. The fire beside us has softened now. Picture the flooded plain after the waters pull away. Smoke rises from a first small sacrifice. The gods gather above it, hungry and relieved. Below, a survivor holds seed in one hand and mud in the other. Life will continue, but under limits. Yet in that same mud, someone will press signs. And those signs will wait longer than the gods expected. The gods feared human memory, but they also feared one another. That is the next quiet clue. In the old stories, the divine world is not a place of perfect stillness. It is crowded with rivals, alliance, fathers challenged by sons, younger gods rising against older powers, storms against seas, order against forces that refuse to be ordered. The Anunnaki and the gods around them do not drift above danger like smoke above a lamp. They stand inside conflict, and conflict requires tools. This is where the source turns to divine weapons. At first, the idea may seem ordinary. Of course, gods have weapons. Myths are full of them. Lightning bolts, nets, maches, spears, arrows, shining metals from heaven, storm birds, talking tools, and seals that bind. We hear such things so often that we almost stop asking what they imply. But the source asks the simple question, why would a god need a weapon if no god could be harmed? A weapon is a confession. It says there is resistance. It says there is danger. It says force must be focused through an object, a sign, a tool, a shape that can strike, bend, cut, stun, or command. In Mesopotamian myth, divine weapons are not dull accessories. They have names. They have roles. They can speak. They can carry messages. They can return to the hand. They can act as extensions of divine will. Ninurta carries Shahur, the talking mace, a weapon that advises and remembers. Marduk prepares his storm weapons against Tiamat, winds, net, bow, and lightning gathered into a terrible order. Gods wield bright forces not because the world is harmless, but because the world can oppose them. The net is especially haunting. A blade cuts. A spear pierces. Lightning burns. But a net bends. It holds something alive enough, powerful enough, or dangerous enough to require restraint. In the Enuma Elish, Marduk uses a net and winds against Tiamat, the great chaos sea. Whether we read this as theology, cosmic, drama, or symbolic memory, the image remains clear. The divine enemy is not ignored. She is contained. Containment is not the same as denial. It is a form of fear made practical. The same is true of heavenly metals. The source points toward divine materials, stones, metals, objects that seem to come from the sky or belong to the gods. Ancient people valued meteoric iron, rare stones, gleaming substances, and materials that felt more than ordinary because they arrived from distant mountains or from the heavens themselves. A weapon made from such material is not only stronger in the story, it is charged with origin. It carries the authority of elsewhere. Now imagine a divine arsenal in shadow, not a modern room with racks and labels. A mythic chamber, the air cool, the floor dark. A mace resting in stillness. A net folded like a sleeping storm. Arrows that do not need feathers because they remember the wind. A blade whose edge catches no ordinary candlelight. These objects are not waiting for theater. They are waiting because somewhere in the divine order, danger is expected to return. A god who cannot be wounded does not need armor. A god who cannot be captured does not need escape. A god who cannot lose power does not need to guard his name. Yet the myths show gods guarding, fighting, hiding, fleeing, binding, wounding, and resting after strain. Rest is another clue. The gods labor in Atrahasis. They grow tired. They rebel against work. After creation or battle, gods feast, recover, gather breath, or receive offerings. They are powerful, but not endless in the later philosophical sense. Their energy can be spent. Their attention can fail. Their bodies, or divine forms, can suffer pressure. This makes them more frightening in one way and more vulnerable in another. A being with limits may act harshly to defend those limits. Enlil sends plague, drought, and flood because human increase presses against divine order. Enki hides knowledge because open confrontation may fail. Marduk demands kingship before he risks battle. Inanna can be trapped in the underworld. Dumuzi can be taken. Gods can lose status. Gods can be replaced in prominence as cities rise and fall. The divine world is not a calm statue. It is politics with storms. And politics always contains vulnerability. The source uses divine weapons to make this point. If the Anunnaki were merely immortal abstractions, beyond all injury, then the myths would not need such intense descriptions of tools, defenses, and conflicts. But Mesopotamian gods belong to a world where power must be maintained. It must be fed with offerings. It must be affirmed through temples. It must be protected by names, rituals, and the possession of the right divine functions. A god can be diminished. That idea may be more important than death in a simple sense. A god may not fall like a mortal body. A god may not vanish into nothing. But a god can lose city, cult, name, power, memory, and place in the divine order. A forgotten god is not dead exactly. But what is a god without worship? What is a god whose true name no one speaks? What is a god stripped of the May powers that made him radiant? This is why the source broadens the meaning of killing. To kill an Anunnaki might mean to sever him from the powers that sustain his divinity. To bind him so he cannot act. To know his hidden name and command his essence. To cut off offerings until his presence fades, to steal the substance or function that keeps him whole, to erase him from memory until only a broken sign remains. Some of this belongs to mythic logic. Some belongs to social reality. Gods tied to cities truly did fade when cities fell. A temple destroyed means fewer offerings. A cult forgotten means less presence in the human world. Theology and history meet there in the dust. Then comes the more disturbing evidence. Damaged tablets. Every ancient tablet is damaged in some way by time. Edges break. Water softens. Fire cracks. Salt rises through clay. A careless hand in ancient or modern times can remove what 1,000 years spared. So we must never see every gap as conspiracy. Most gaps are simply time doing its patient work. But the source focuses on places where the damage feels more deliberate. Scratches across names, erased lines near rituals, broken passages exactly where a dangerous substance might have been listed, signs removed around divine titles, binding formulas, or secret knowledge. We should be careful. Scholars would not accept every such claim without close analysis. Some erasures may be scribal correction. Some may be accidental. Some may be ritual cancellation. Some may have happened long after the tablet was made. The source leans toward the possibility that certain knowledge was intentionally hidden. As a story image, it is powerful. Picture a scribe in low lamplight. The tablet is still damp enough to alter. He has copied an old line from an older source. It contains a name, or a phrase, or an ingredient that makes him pause. His reed stylus rests above the clay. Outside, the city is quiet. Somewhere, water moves through a channel. He knows that clay remembers. He knows that what is written can outlive the hand. He knows that a name written plainly may be spoken by someone who should never speak it. So he scratches the line. Not because he does not know, because he does. The marks tear the surface. The word becomes a wound. Later, readers will see the interruption and lean closer, exactly as we are leaning now. The erasure fails to erase the feeling of danger. In fact, it creates it. A missing word can be louder than a preserved one. This is the mood of forbidden knowledge. It does not always announce itself with a curse. Sometimes it appears as a gap where the mind expects a word. A careful silence. A place where the scribe has decided that preservation and concealment must happen at the same time. The same pattern appears in ritual traditions. Mesopotamian incantation series contain names, divine powers, binding language, and formulas for protection, purification, or reversal of harm. These texts were not casual reading for a bored evening. They belonged to trained specialists. Words had to be spoken correctly. Names had to be handled with caution. The act of writing itself was not neutral. If a name could summon, then a written name was not inert. If a ritual could bind a demon, perhaps a more dangerous ritual might bind something greater. If a divine title was a shield, a hidden name might be a key. That is why the source places the divine weapons and the damaged tablets side by side. Weapons show that gods can face force. Erasures suggest that knowledge itself can become force. A mace can strike a body. A name can touch an essence. A substance can affect life. A ritual can alter the relationship between worlds. The question grows darker. What if the true weapon against a god was never only metal or thunder? What if it was information? Not information as our modern screens know it. Bright, endless, and usually surrounded by distractions. Information as the ancient world knew it. Rade, guarded, memorized, copied by hand, hidden in temple schools, sealed inside names, recipes, rate, and myths. Knowledge that took generations to gather and one careless mouth to misuse. The gods guarded power because power could move. They guarded names because names could reveal. They guarded substances because substances could change mortality. They guarded rituals because rituals could reach where hands could not. This is why humanity frightened them in the source reading. Humans were weak. Yes. Humans died quickly. Humans needed food, water, warmth, sleep, and mercy. But humans also copied. Humans watched. Humans stored secrets in clay. Humans preserved what one lifetime could not keep. Human memory was slow, but slow things can be dangerous. A river cuts stone slowly, too. The divine weapons tell us the gods could be opposed. The divine exhaustion tells us they could be depleted. The divine erasures suggest they could be exposed. And all of that prepares us for the next hidden chamber of the story, the chamber of names. Because in the ancient world, a name was not a label placed politely on the outside of a being. A true name belonged to the inside. It held essence, rank, story, and power. To know it was not merely to identify. It was to touch. The fire beside us is almost quiet now. Though not gone, a red glow holds under the ash. Imagine the divine arsenal fading into shadow. Imagine a cracked tablet under glass. The line we need has been scratched away. A scribe long dead has left us not an answer, but a wound in the text. And through that wound, the story begins to whisper the next danger. The gods could be harmed by weapons, but they could be undone by names. Names are quieter than weapons. That is why they frighten older stories so deeply. A weapon can be seen. A blade can be hidden under cloth. A mace can rest in a temple shadow. A net can be folded and guarded. But a name can live inside a mouth. It can pass from teacher to student, from priest to apprentice, from mother to child, from one frightened scribe to another. A name may look like sound, but in the ancient world, it was never only sound. A true name touched the inside of a being. It was not the label placed on the outside so people could call across a courtyard. It was not a convenient mark, like saying, "Bring that jar," or "Fetch that basket," or "Please stop moving the sacred chair because everyone knows where it belongs." A true name belonged to essence. To know it was to know the shape behind the face. To speak it correctly was to reach toward the power that held a god together. This is where the scratched tablets become more than damaged objects. Imagine a scribe in a dim room, with wet clay resting across his knees. The lamp is low. The flame leans and straightens. Outside, the city has entered its smaller night sounds. Sandals in an alley, water in a channel, a dog moving through dust, the faint cough of someone still awake. The scribe copies from an older tablet, sign after sign, the reed stylus pressing into the soft surface with steady care. Then he reaches a name, not an ordinary divine title, not Lord of Heaven, not Great One, not Stormbearer, a deeper name, perhaps one used only in ritual, perhaps one meant to bind, perhaps one that tradition says should be known by the initiated and no one else. His hand stops. This pause is the whole story. He can copy it. He can erase it. He can replace it with a title. He can scratch the clay so the mark remains wounded but unreadable. He knows that clay remembers, and that memory is both gift and danger. A tablet can outlive the temple that stores it. It can outlive the family of the scribe. It can outlive the king whose name fills half the archive with glorious claims and very little humility. A forbidden name written plainly may pass into a future that no priest can supervise. So he drags the stylus across the signs. The clay tears. The name becomes a scar. Later readers will see the gap and feel exactly what we feel now. A quiet pressure in the chest, the sense that the missing thing mattered. Most damaged lines in ancient tablets are the work of time. Accident, salt, damp, fire, and broken storage. We should not turn every crack into conspiracy. But the source asks us to consider a more deliberate kind of silence. Passages scratched where divine names, substance, or binding knowledge may have stood. Whether every example is certain or not, the fear behind the idea is deeply ancient. Names were power. In Mesopotamian ritual texts, names and titles could protect. A healer or exorcist might invoke many divine names to push back illness, witchcraft, demons, bad dreams, or the invisible disorder that clung to a house. To name a power was to locate it. To locate it was to address it. To address it correctly was to bring it into a field of command. This is not so strange if we slow down. Even now, a thing unnamed can feel larger. A fear with no name spreads in the dark. A sickness named becomes something the mind can hold. A grief spoken aloud changes shape, not because speech is magic in the simple sense, but because naming draws a boundary around what was shapeless. The ancients took that truth much further. They believed a name could carry the being itself. So a hidden name had to be guarded. The source compares this to one of the most famous stories from Egypt, the tale of Ra and Isis. Let us leave Mesopotamia for a moment, quietly, like someone stepping from one dark temple into another. The Egyptian sun god Ra has grown old. His light is still great, but age has entered him. The story does not make him weak like an ordinary man, but it allows him to become vulnerable. His body produces spittle. His steps leave dust. These humble substances matter because Isis is watching. Isis is patient. That is perhaps the most dangerous thing about her. She gathers the spittle of Ra with the dust of the road. From these materials, from what has come from his own body and from the earth beneath his path, she shapes a serpent. The serpent bites Ra. The poison enters him. The sun god suffers, and though he knows many names and many powers, he cannot heal himself. Isis comes near. She offers healing, but only if he reveals his secret name. Ra speaks titles first. He gives names that describe him: Great Maker, Lord of Light, Father of Gods, the one who sails the sky. But Isis knows the difference between title and essence. Titles are garments. She wants the body beneath. She waits, and the poison continues its quiet work. At last, Ra yields. His true name passes from him to her. With it, she gains power that had belonged only to him. He is healed, but he is also changed. Some portion of his hidden supremacy has left him. Not because a sword struck him down, not because a battle defeated him, because a name moved. This is one of the clearest mythic examples of divine vulnerability through language. It shows that gods can guard secrets because secrets can hold power. It also shows that a god may survive the loss of a name, yet no longer remain untouched. Return now to Mesopotamia. The details differ. The theology differs. The languages differ. But the feeling is familiar. There are names that should not be said carelessly. There are divine titles layered over deeper identities. There are ritual series, such as Maklu and Shorpu, filled with incantations, purifications, and names used to protect, bind, or unduarm. The specialist who speaks them is not merely reciting poetry. He is handling power. Some divine names are written with unusual signs. Some are concealed under titles. Some are known only in scholarly or ritual contexts. Some are surrounded by warnings, formulas, and careful procedures. To modern readers, this can look like symbolic religion, and it is that. But inside the ancient worldview, symbolic religion was not weak. It was how invisible force became manageable. This is why the source makes names central to the question of killing a god. To kill may mean more than stopping breath. A true name might bind a god to a ritual. It might strip a divine being of distance. It might expose the hidden structure by which power holds together. It might let another being command, diminish, redirect, or silence that power. If the Anunnaki were not absolute in the later philosophical sense, if they had limits, if they depended on names, offerings, made powers, substance, and memory, then a true name becomes more dangerous than a blade. A blade touches form. A name touches essence. Imagine the difference. A divine warrior sees a weapon coming and raises a shield. But what shield blocks a word spoken correctly? What armor protects a hidden name once it has entered another mind? The source would say that this is why scribes might scratch certain passages. Not from ignorance, but from responsibility, fear, or obedience. Perhaps the text was meant to preserve the ritual for trained hands while blocking it from untrained mouths. Perhaps the scribe copied enough to maintain tradition, then removed the sharpest edge. Perhaps a later priest damaged the line intentionally after deciding that even an archive was too dangerous a place for that knowledge. We cannot be sure, but the image has power. A scribe is guardian of absence, a hand that preserves by erasing, a word protected by being wounded. There is something deeply human in this. We often think knowledge should always be kept whole, but ancient ritual cultures knew that some knowledge changes the one who holds it. A healing formula can become a curse if turned. A name used for praise can become a hook if known too deeply. A substance that grants life may become a substance that steals it if placed in another hand. So the forbidden tablet is not only a damaged document, it is a moral scene. The scribe knows that copying is not neutral. The hand must choose. This choice becomes darker when we remember human origin from divine blood. Humans were made from the intelligence of a sacrificed god. That means human beings, in the mythic logic of the source, possess the very faculty that can gather dangerous names. Humans can listen. Humans can compare. Humans can notice that one hymn calls a god by one name, a ritual by another, an omen list by another, a secret commentary by a fourth. Humans can assemble what gods and priests keep apart. One person cannot know everything, but a tradition can. A school can. A library can. A city can. The record keeper sees. The record keeper preserves. The record keeper may scratch out a line, but the act of scratching tells the future that something stood there. The source calls this the weapon of absence. A missing name creates a hunger in the reader. We lean toward the gap. We imagine the lost sound. We wonder whether the god was protected by the loss or exposed by it. The silence becomes active. That is why names lead naturally to the next kind of forbidden knowledge, substance. Because if a name touches essence, a substance touches life. A true name might bind or command. A plant, a food, a water, a mineral, a poison, or a medicine might change the condition of immortality itself. The ancients understood that the body could be altered. Herbs could heal. Venoms could harm. Minerals could purify or poison. Waters could cleanse or transform. If gods had bodies, even divine bodies, then substances mattered. And if immortality could be given by food or water, then perhaps it could be withheld, or stolen, or undone. The fire beside us lowers into red patience. In the imagined archive, the scribe has finished the line. The forbidden name is no longer readable, but it has not vanished from the story. It sits there as a wound in clay, as a silence shaped like power. Somewhere beyond that silence, a serpent slides toward a plant in the dark. Somewhere a man named Gilgamesh searches for life that does not end. Somewhere a mortal named Adapa stands before heaven and refuses the food that might have made him more than mortal. The names have brought us to the edge of the next secret. The gods may be harmed by what is spoken, but they may also depend on what is eaten, drunk, hidden, and kept from human hands. Immortality sounds simple until the old stories begin to touch it. A god is immortal. We say, and the word seems to close the door. But the myths do not always close it. They leave little openings. A plant that restores youth, food and water that grant life, nectar churned from a cosmic sea, hidden substances in the deep, recipes scratched where ingredients should be. The more closely we listen, the less immortality feels like an unbreakable condition, and the more it begins to feel like something maintained, guarded, rationed, and sometimes lost. That is where the source turns next. If divine beings cannot truly die, why do life-giving substances appear at all? It is not a proof. It is a question. A soft one, but sharp enough. The first image is Gilgamesh. He is not a god, though part of him belongs near the divine. He is king of Uruk, strong, proud, restless, loved by the gods and punished by grief. His friend Enkidu dies, and the death changes him. Before grief, Gilgamesh can boast. After grief, every wall of Uruk becomes a wall around a temporary life. His strength does not help him. His kingship does not help him. His city does not answer the one question that keeps him awake. Must I die too? The epic follows him through wilderness, mountain, darkness, waters of death, and the presence of Utnapishtim, the flood survivor who has received a kind of life beyond ordinary human limit. Gilgamesh seeks what the gods have kept for mortals. He wants not only comfort, he wants the boundary broken. At last, he hears of a plant of life, or a plant that restores youth, hidden in the deep waters. He must descend to get it. Stones are tied to his feet so he can sink. He goes down into the dark water, away from air, away from light, away from the world of men. The plant is thorned. It tears his hands. He takes it anyway. Keep the image soft. A tired king rising from cosmic water, hands stinging, breath hard, holding a small rough thing that may undo age. Not a palace, not a weapon, not a throne. A plant. There is humility in that. The thing he has crossed the world for could fit in his hands. Ancient stories know how to make the greatest desire small enough to lose. Gilgamesh does not eat it at once. He plans to take it back to Uruk and test it on an elder. That detail matters because it shows a flash of care inside his hunger. He wants to bring youth back to the city. He wants to share the discovery, or at least prove it before trusting it. For a moment, immortality seems close enough to carry home. Then he stops to bathe. A serpent smells the plant. The serpent comes silently, takes it, and slips away. Its skin is renewed as it leaves. Gilgamesh returns and finds the plant gone. The old boundary remains. The king sits in the exhaustion beyond tears. He has touched the secret and lost it. The loss is small and devastating. No army, no thunder, only a serpent, a pool, a moment of rest, and the terrible fact that what is found can be stolen. The source reads this as a clue. The plant suggests that youth, renewal, or a measure of immortality can be accessed through substance. It does not mean gods are easily killed. It does not prove a recipe for divine death. But it shows that life extension is imagined as something material, hidden, recoverable, and vulnerable to theft. The serpent becomes important too. It takes the plant and sheds its skin. Renewal passes to the creature that steals. Humanity remains mortal. Knowledge came close, but not close enough. The gods do not even need to appear in the scene for divine boundaries to remain intact. The world itself seems to protect the limit. Then comes Adapa. Adapa is a wise man, associated with Eridu and the wisdom of Enki. He breaks the wing of the south wind in one story and is summoned to heaven before Anu. Before he goes, Enki warns him, "Do not eat the food offered there. Do not drink the water offered there." Enki says, "These will be food and water of death." Adapa obeys. When he stands before Anu, the high god offers him food and water. But these are not death. They are life. Food of life. Water of life. Adapa refuses. By following Enki's warning, he loses the chance to become immortal. This story is quiet and cruel. A man is protected by obedience, but obedience also closes the door to a greater gift. Did Enki deceive him? Did he protect humanity from something too dangerous? The story leaves uncertainty, which is often where ancient texts breathe best. The source leans toward suspicion. If food and water of life exist in heaven, then immortality may be something conferred by access. If Adapa refuses them, then humanity remains mortal, not because life eternal was impossible, but because it was withheld, misunderstood, or refused at the crucial moment. Again, careful. This is mythic logic, not laboratory evidence, but inside the story world, substances matter. The gods eat. The gods drink. They receive offerings. They hunger after the flood when humans nearly vanish. They gather around sacrifice in a line from Atrahasis that makes divine dependence feel almost uncomfortable. The gods may be powerful, but they are not disconnected from sustenance, ritual, and exchange. If food can maintain divine order, perhaps special food can grant divine status. If water can cleanse, perhaps hidden water can transform. If plants can heal, perhaps one plant can renew. The Abzu becomes central here, the deep fresh water beneath the earth, domain of Enki, source of wisdom, hidden life, and strange processes. A substance from such a depth would not feel ordinary. It would feel like water carrying creation memory. The source suggests that certain medical and magical texts may preserve hints of powerful substances, plants, minerals, purifications, binding ingredients, and damaged lists whose missing words seem suggestive. We must be honest. Many such texts are damaged simply because time is a careless librarian, and many formulas concern demons, illness, witchcraft, or ritual impurity, not gods themselves. Still, the pattern is intriguing. A culture that understood plants and minerals as powerful agents could easily imagine divine substances as more powerful still. A god might be affected not by common poison, but by the right mixture, name, momen, water, and hidden plant. This is where the source returns to damaged ingredient lists. Picture a temple table in low light. Bowls of powdered mineral. Bitter helps. Resin. Oil. Salt. Water from a particular spring. Clay from a boundary place. A thread. A small knife. A tablet with instructions. The ritual specialist reads carefully because order matters. Wrong order changes meaning. Wrong name changes address. Wrong substance changes result. Then, at the crucial line, the tablet breaks, or the word is scratched, or the ingredient is unreadable. The gap becomes almost theatrical, though no ancient scribe intended to entertain us. It is as if the recipe reaches its sharpest point and then turns into silence. The source asks whether such silences protect forbidden knowledge. Scholars would answer cautiously. Sometimes, yes, maybe a restricted formula. Sometimes no, just damage. Often we cannot know. But for a dark, mythic sleep story, the uncertainty itself is the room we sit inside. The missing ingredient becomes an image of all the knowledge that ancient specialists may have guarded, and all that time has taken. Now connect this back to immortality. If youth can be restored by a plant, then age can be altered. If life can be granted by food and water, then mortality can be crossed. If divine power can be held in May powers, then divinity has parts. If names can bind essence, then gods have hidden structures. If substances can transform condition, then immortality may not be absolute. It may be maintained. The source does not say that one could kill an Anunnaki with a simple herb. That would make the mystery too cheap. It suggests something more complex. A combination of knowledge, true name, divine substance, ritual timing, and understanding of how power is held. To harm such a being, one would need to know what sustains it, what it hides, what it consumes, what name touches it, what may power can be separated from it. In other words, the weapon is not the substance alone. The weapon is knowledge of the substance. This brings us back to the gods' fear of human intelligence. A human alone is short-lived. A human body is fragile. But a tradition of healers, priests, scribes, farmers, and ritual specialists can gather plant knowledge across centuries. One generation learns which root heals fever. Another learns which mineral cleanses a house. Another copies a formula against demons. Another notices that a divine name appears beside a rare resin. Another preserves a story of food and water of life. The fragments gather slowly, like silt in a canal, changing the path season after season. The gods, in the source reading, may have feared that accumulation, not because humanity already had the final secret, but because humanity had the method for finding it. Observation, memory, writing, transmission, curiosity, the same divine intelligence mixed into clay at the beginning now leans over tablets and asks what was missing. There is a strange sadness in all the immortality stories. Gilgamesh loses the plant. Adapa refuses the food and water. Humans keep dying. The boundary remains, but the boundary is shown. That is the dangerous part. A hidden boundary is only fate. A visible boundary becomes a problem. Once humanity knows that youth can be restored somewhere, that food of life exists somewhere, that the gods eat something we do not, mortality stops feeling natural and begins to feel managed. Managed mortality can be questioned. Questioned mortality can be challenged. And the gods who manage it become less like unreachable absolutes and more like gatekeepers standing in front of a locked storehouse. The fire near us is low, but the ember still holds. Imagine Gilgamesh beside the pool, the plant gone. Imagine Adapa in heaven, refusing the cup. Imagine a damaged ritual tablet with one ingredient missing, and the Abzu below the earth, dark and cool. The story is not yet answering with certainty. It is gathering instruments, a name that can bind, a power that can be stolen, blood that can transfer mind, a plant that restores youth, food and water that grant life, and a substance hidden in the deep. These are fragments of forbidden science, or sacred mythology, or both braided together in the old human way. And when such fragments appear in many cultures, far beyond Mesopotamia, the question widens. Perhaps the Anunnaki were not alone in their vulnerability. Perhaps the world itself is full of stories where gods can be murdered, imprisoned, poisoned, deprived, forgotten, and made to fade. That wider echo is where the path now turns. The path now widens beyond Mesopotamia. That is what happens when a question becomes old enough. It refuses to stay in one city. It crosses rivers, deserts, seas, and languages. It leaves the clay of Nineveh and walks into other temples, other poems, other nights where people looked at the heavens and imagined beings too powerful to be human, yet not always safe from pain, loss, or ending. The source asks us to notice a pattern. The Anunnaki are not the only gods who can be threatened. Across the world, in stories far from Sumer, divine beings bleed, weaken, lose power, fall into prisons, vanish into hidden places, or die under the weight of prophecy. This does not prove that all myths preserve the same secret history. We should be careful with that. Similar stories can rise because human beings share fears, hopes, and ways of thinking. But the pattern is still haunting. Gods are rarely as untouchable as they first appear. Begin in Egypt, beside the dark river. The Nile moves slowly in the imagination, black and silver under moonlight. Reeds whisper. The air is warm. Somewhere a temple wall holds painted gods with still faces and forward eyes. In that world, Osiris rules as a divine king, linked with fertility, order, death, and renewal. He is beloved, but beloved beings are not safe simply because they are beloved. Set betrays him. The story changes across traditions, but the shape remains. Agiist, a trap, a divine body enclosed, water carrying what should have remained enthroned. Later, the body is found, lost again, divided, mourned, and gathered by Isis with a devotion that feels quieter than any royal procession. She searches, she laments, she restores what can be restored. But Osiris does not return as he was. He becomes Lord of the Dead. That transformation is important. Osiris is not erased. He is not nothing, but he is changed forever. His kingship moves from the living land to the underworld. His death becomes the foundation of another kind of power. In the source pattern, this matters because it shows a god can be murdered, remade, and limited by the very event that makes him sacred. Death does not destroy the myth. It creates it. Think of Isis in the quiet after loss. Not a loud grief, a searching grief, a patient grief. Her hands gather fragments of a world that has come apart. The river keeps moving. The night air smells of water, mud, linen, and incense. Somewhere, a name is spoken with more care than before. Because a god who has died teaches mortals that divinity has an edge. From Egypt, the story moves toward Greece. The Greek divine world is bright on the surface, full of marble, sky, sea, and wine-colored horizons. But under that brightness is a brutal family history. The gods are not peaceful immortals who sit forever in perfect agreement. They overthrow, imprison, deceive, wound, and replace one another. Uranos, the sky, is wounded by Kronos with a blade of adamantine. Divine blood falls to earth, and from that blood come new beings and new consequences. Already the pattern returns. Divine blood does not vanish. It creates. It produces. It carries force into the world. Kronos then rules, fearful of his own children. He swallows them to prevent prophecy. A father consumes the future because he cannot bear the thought of losing power. Zeus is hidden, grows, returns, and frees the swallowed gods. The old ruler falls. The Titans are defeated and imprisoned in Tartarus, a deep prison beneath the world. That imprisonment matters. A god does not have to die in order to be removed. A bound god is a diminished god. A god locked away from worship, action, and rule has suffered a kind of living death. Tartarus is not only a place. It is the mythic answer to the problem of beings too powerful to leave free and too divine to simply discard. The source uses this to widen the meaning of killing. Murder is one path. Imprisonment is another. Forgetting is another. Separation from power is another. Then the northern stories call from the snow. Norse myth carries perhaps the most open declaration that gods can die. The gods know Ragnarok is coming. They know the wolf, the serpent, the fire, the ship of nails, the last battle, the breaking of old bonds. They know that prophecy has already laid tracks under their feet, and still they walk forward. There is something painfully calm in that. Odin, the wise one, the seeker of runes, the one who gave an eye for knowledge, goes toward Fenrir, knowing the wolf will swallow him. Thor meets the world serpent, kills it, and then dies from its poison after only a few steps. Freyr fouls. Heimdall and Loki destroy one another. Tyr and Garm meet in mutual ending. The cosmos itself burns and sinks, then rises renewed. These are not immortal gods in the untouchable sense. They are mighty, but faded. They are radiant, but vulnerable. Their knowledge does not spare them from the end. In fact, their knowledge may make the end more solemn. To fight without knowing you may die is courage of one kind. To walk toward a known ending is another, deeper kind. The source notices especially the poison. Thor is not weak. He is thunder. He is strength. He is the defender of gods and humans. Yet poison from the serpent reaches him. He wins, and still dies. Victory and death stand beside each other like two quiet figures in the snow. This returns us to the substances of Mesopotamia. Plants of life. Waters of life. Poison. Nectar. Food that grants immortality. The divine body, in myth after myth, can be altered by what enters it. In India, the gods are also not simply immortal by nature in every story. The Devas and Asuras churn the cosmic ocean for Amrita, the nectar of immortality. They do not already possess it fully and permanently. They seek it. They work for it. They struggle over it. The ocean is churned with mountain and serpent, and from the deep come treasures, danger, poison, beauty, and at last the nectar that grants deathlessness. This is a magnificent image. The universe itself becomes a vessel. The gods labor for immortality. The substance must be obtained. Rahu, the shadow being, drinks some of the Amrita by deception. Vishnu cuts him apart, but because the nectar has touched him, his head becomes immortal. Even partial contact changes fate. A small measure of divine substance creates a lingering cosmic being, forever connected with eclipse, hunger, interruption, and the swallowing of light. Again, the pattern appears. Immortality is not always simple nature. It is acquired. It is guarded. It can be stolen. It can be incomplete. Now move westward, into the mist of Celtic memory. The Tuatha De Danann arrive in Ireland with treasures and shining arts. They are godlike, powerful, beautiful, skilled in battle and enchantment, yet they lose. Human powers rise. The old divine race retreats into the hills, into side mounds, into hidden places beneath the green earth. They do not die in one clean blow. They fade sideways. This is one of the saddest divine endings. Not murder, not poison, but a thinning through memory. A god can be killed by being made smaller in the human mind. The source brings these traditions together to show that divine vulnerability is not unusual in world mythology. It is everywhere once we begin looking. Osiris can be murdered and remade. Uranos can be wounded. Titans can be imprisoned. Norse gods can die at the end of the age. Devas need nectar. Rahu becomes immortal by swallowing a stolen portion. The Tuatha lose the surface world and withdraw into hills. Gods fall through many doors. Akist, a blade, a prison, a prophecy. Apuezo, a nectar withheld, a battle lost, a name forgotten. This does not mean every culture secretly knew the same literal method for killing gods. That would be too simple, and old stories dislike being made simple. The safer reading is that human beings understood power through vulnerability. We imagined gods with bodies, appetit, names, families, weapons, rivals, and fates, because those are the shapes through which human minds understand existence. But the speculative reading remains in the shadow. If so many cultures remembered gods who could fall, maybe the idea of invulnerable divinity is the later simplification. Maybe the older imagination knew something more layered. Gods were greater than humans, but not beyond all limit. They could be harmed if one knew the right name, the right substance, the right weapon, the right timing, the right prison, or the right way to make memory fade. This is exactly the path the Source walks. It does not need one sword that kills an Anunnaki. It gathers a pattern of vulnerabilities. Divine blood can be used. Divine powers can be stolen. Humanity can inherit intelligence. Life-giving substances can be withheld or taken. Names can bind. Weapons can wound. Gods can tire. Offerings can matter. Memory can sustain. Forgetting can diminish. When these pieces are placed beside the Anunnaki, the forbidden secret begins to look less like an object and more like a map of how divine beings depend on systems that can be understood. That is the frightening part for the gods. A weapon can be locked away. A plant can be hidden in the deep. A name can be erased from clay. But patterns are harder to bury. Human beings notice patterns. We notice that one god weakens when offerings cease. Another loses power when a true name is spoken. Another requires nectar. Another dies from poison. Another is imprisoned below the world. Another fades when the people stop remembering. The stories are far apart. But the human mind does what it always does. It gathers. In the room beside our fire, these myths become very quiet. Osiris drifts on dark water. Kronos greeps the sky. Odin walks into snow. Thor stands for a moment after victory, feeling poison in the blood. The Devas guard their nectar. The Tuatha enter the green hills and become almost memory. And beneath all these images, the same thought breathes. The divine can be diminished. The divine can be changed. The divine can lose what makes it untouchable. The Source will now turn that thought back toward humanity. Because if humans were made from the blood of a thinking God, if humans were shortened and limited because they became too noisy, if humans copied tablets and preserved names and watched gods across generations, then perhaps the final danger was never a weapon lying in a temple. Perhaps the danger was the listener, the human mind, the clay that remembers, the servant who watches, the species that dies one by one, yet gathers knowledge slowly enough to outlast kings, cities, and even the gods who feared being understood. Now the fragments return to the table. Not a bright table. Not a scholar table with everything in order and the answers stacked neatly beside a lamp. A darker table. A quieter one. Burned clay. Broken edges. A scratched name. A story of divine blood. A boat carrying stolen May powers. A plague survived by secret knowledge. A flood that failed to erase humanity. A weapon made because gods could be opposed. A plant stolen by a serpent. Food and water of life refused. Gods in other lands wounded, bound, poisoned, imprisoned, murdered, or forgotten. Each fragment alone is strange. Together, they begin to whisper. The source gives its final answer softly, but the answer is not small. What could kill an Anunnaki? Knowledge. Not knowledge as a tidy fact written on a classroom board. Knowledge in the old sense. Dangerous knowing. Knowing a true name. Knowing how divine blood works. Knowing that the May powers can be transferred. Knowing what substance maintains life. Knowing what word binds a being. Knowing that a creator may be powerful, yet still limited. This is why the story began with a scratched tablet. The missing words matter because they suggest a world where some knowledge was too sharp to leave uncovered. Maybe the scratches were ordinary damage. Maybe they were correction. Maybe they were ritual cancellation. We must keep that caution. But inside the source story, the erasure becomes an image of fear. A scribe sees a word and decides the future should not read it easily. That is knowledge as weapon. A blade wounds the body. A true name touches the essence. A stolen May power empties the office. A hidden ritual binds what cannot be struck. The Anunnaki in these stories do not look like absolute beings beyond change. They look like powerful rulers inside a system. They have ranks, councils, names, needs, weapons, conflicts, food, offerings, and fear. They can create humanity, but they also depend on humanity. They can send flood, but they gather after flood for smoke and sacrifice. They can shorten human life, but they cannot stop humans from copying memory into clay. That is the central reversal. The gods make servants. The servants become witnesses. The gods make workers. The workers become scribes. The gods make mortals. The mortals make memory. Honestly, that may be the deepest horror in the source, at least from the divine side. Not that humans are stronger. We are not. Not that humans live longer. We do not. Not that one human hand can reach into heaven and strike down a god. It cannot. Not in the plain way. The danger is slower, more patient, more like water under a wall. Humans observe. A servant in a temple notices when offerings are required. A priest learns which names are spoken only in the inner room. A healer learns which plant draws fever down. A scribe copies a ritual he may not fully understand. A student memorizes a list because his teacher tells him to, not knowing that the list may carry a dangerous old shape. A survivor tells a child that once the gods tried to drown the world and failed to finish the silence. One life ends, another remembers. That is how mortality is answered. The gods shortened life, the source says, to control numbers, and perhaps to limit knowledge. A single long life could gather too much. It could watch too many kings fall. It could compare too many versions of divine fear. It could keep secrets too well. So human years became short. Bodies weakened. Children did not always survive. Some wombs remained closed. Age came like dust on clay. But the gods may have underestimated transmission. A human body dies. A tablet weight. A forbidden name is scratched away. The scratch remains too. In this way, even absence becomes part of memory. A missing sign teaches later readers that someone chose silence. A broken line becomes a doorway. A damaged formula becomes a question that outlives the priest who damaged it. This is why the final answer cannot be only one thing. It is not only a weapon. It is not only a name. It is not only a plant. It is not only a ritual. It is the knowledge that gathers them into pattern. The knowledge that divine blood can transfer consciousness. The knowledge that May powers can be stolen. The knowledge that true names are guarded. The knowledge that life-giving substances exist. The knowledge that gods can be wounded, bound, poisoned, imprisoned, or forgotten. The knowledge that a creator can fear the creation. A creator is safe while the creation does not understand. A master is safe while the servant does not watch too carefully. A god is safe while the worshipper believes power is whole, sealed, and unreachable. But the human mind is not good at leaving sealed things alone. It listens at doors. It compares stories. It asks why one myth says blood, another says name, another says plant, another says flood, another says forbidden food, another says divine weapon. It does not always know what it is doing, which is sometimes even more dangerous. The source imagines humanity as the hidden continuation of the sacrificed god. Wilu, or Geshtu, dies, but the mind does not vanish. It enters clay. It multiplies. It becomes farmers, scribes, healers, builders, mourners, and children who ask too many questions before sleep. Humanity becomes a scattered god mind. If we follow the source into its darkest image, not divine in the full sense, not immortal, but still carrying a spark that came from above and from violence, that spark wants to know. This is why the oldest myths often try to control knowledge. Do not eat this. Do not speak that. Do not steal the powers. Do not seek the plant. Do not accept the food of life unless heaven intends it. Do not reveal the hidden name. Do not copy that line. Do not let the servant learn too much of the master's dependence. Rules gather around thresholds, because thresholds can be crossed, and humans are threshold creatures. Clay and divine blood, mortal body and questioning mind. Worker and watcher, servant and scribe, short-lived and long remembering, made to obey, yet made from intelligence. There is tenderness in that too. The source is dark, but it is not only dark. It reminds us that human curiosity is not an accident. It is our inheritance. The same trait that makes us dangerous in the myth also makes us capable of compassion. Art, healing, architecture, astronomy, and stories whispered by fire. The gods may fear what we can learn, but learning is also how we survive. We learn which water is clean, which herb eases pain, which season plants best, which ruler is cruel, which story helps a child sleep after thunder. Knowledge can wound. Knowledge can also mend. That is the balance the story leaves us with. The forbidden secret is not that the gods were weak in a simple way. It is that power has structure. Anything with structure can be understood. Anything understood can be changed. The Anunnaki may have ruled from high places, but the old texts show seams in their divinity. Blood, names, may powers, food, water, offerings, weapons, rest, fear, dependence. A seam is not a collapse, but it is a beginning. Now imagine the final tablet. It lies under museum glass in a room where people walk slowly and speak in half voices. The clay is the color of dry earth. The surface is cracked. One side is broken away. A line begins clearly, then disappears under scratches. The label beside it gives safe information. Date, place, language, period, collection. Useful things, necessary things. But the tablet itself seems to hold another message. Look where the word is missing. Listen where the silence thickens. A visitor leans closer. The glass reflects a tired, modern face over the ancient marks. For one moment, the distance between scribe and reader becomes thin. The same human mind that once copied, erased, feared, and preserved now looks back through another body. That is the strange loop. Humans were made from clay. Humans wrote on clay. Clay preserved the story of how humans were made. Clay now tells humans that the gods may have feared what humans could learn. The servant has returned to read the master's fear. There is no need to take all of this as literal history. In fact, we should not force it that way. These are myths, ritual memories, theological stories, damaged texts, later interpretations, and speculative readings. We can say clearly, this is not proven. It is a dark, mythic interpretation built from fragments. But fragments have their own power. A broken bowl still tells us there was once a vessel. A scratched name still tells us there was once a name. A myth of divine blood still tells us that ancient people imagined humanity as carrying something from the gods. And a human being lying quietly in the dark still carries the same old question. What are we allowed to know? The fire beside us has lowered almost to ash. The room is soft. Candlelight moves only a little now, as if even flame has grown thoughtful. Outside the imagined window, the stars remain distant. They do not answer quickly. Perhaps that is kind of them. Let the fragments settle. Wilu, the thinking god, whose blood became clay. The May powers, carried away like invisible treasure. The flood, meant to silence humanity, yet followed by survival. The true names, hidden because essence could be touched. The plant, stolen by the serpent. The food and water, refused by Adapa. The gods of many lands, murdered, imprisoned, poisoned, deprived, diminished, or forgotten. All these pieces return to one quiet answer. What could kill an Anunnaki? Perhaps not one thing. Perhaps a gathering. A nama. A substance. A stolen power. A ritual. A memory. A written line. A human mind patient enough to assemble them. And perhaps that is why the old tablets are so broken. Not because truth always wants to be hidden, but because time, fear, fire, and reverence all touched the clay. Some words were lost by accident, some by weather, some by war, some perhaps by hands that thought silence was safer than preservation. But the silence did not end the question. It carried it. Now let the question become gentle. Not a weapon in your hand, not a fear in your chest, only a small ember of curiosity, glowing quietly where the old stories have placed it. You do not need to solve the tablet tonight. You do not need to restore the scratched name. You do not need to die for the plant, refuse the heavenly cup, steal the May powers, or challenge the gods before morning. The mind can rest. The clay can wait. The erased word can remain erased. And still, somewhere inside human thought, the divine spark continues to ask. If the creators feared knowledge, then perhaps the most ancient forbidden secret was never hidden outside us at all. Perhaps it was placed in clay at the beginning. Perhaps it opened its eyes. Good night.